I'm going to try to make some recordings here while I run the machines. I'm actually running two machines. I'm running the horizontal mill way over there. You can't really see it. It's behind that crane, that side of the crane. And this Mazak here is roughing a part out. So I'm going to have to stop at times to change inserts and stuff. And this high pressure pump is running right next to me over here on this Mazak. Putting high pressure coolant on that tool, so it's kind of noisy, but this is my environment during the day. And I was going to try to relate some things that people have asked questions on the comments about certain things, about how I got started, how I quote jobs, how I do this kind of thing. And I thought maybe I could make some recordings here while I work and explain some of those things if I can. The way I got started was in my garage, just like a lot of you guys probably are doing with your hobby work and things. I had a machine. My dad had a little, I think it was a Craftsman. These little Craftsman lathes were made by Logan, and he had a little lathe in there, and we had one of those drill mills. And I did work for people, just anything I could get, basically. I didn't make tons of money. I just did it because I wanted to do it and get some experience. I had a Miller welder, and I did some welding, and I turned parts on those lathes. A lot of them were for people that were doing things like one of them was this guy. He ran outboard runabouts, antique motors on them, and you couldn't buy the parts, so we machined parts and repair lower units and things. And I did some little side jobs for other people in the garage, and then I bought a lathe. I think I've showed it in the shop tour, a few of the machines I had in the garage. I bought a Mirando lathe because I was making these plastic parts for this customer. They were valve parts, and they had metric threads on them, and so it's much easier to turn a metric thread on a manual. On a manual engine lathe. That's a metric engine lathe because you can engage and disengage half nuts and stuff when you're making the threads. In fact, turning metric threads on a metric lathe is much easier than turning English threads on an English lathe, because the metric threads are very uniform and you can almost engage the half nuts anywhere you want on most threads, and it doesn't make any difference. So I had that job, and I had a job in a town called Tomball close to me here that I just did these little I think there were gas regulators of some sort. There were little aluminum castings, and I did like 3 holes, faced the tops of them and did like 3 holes. And in order to do that job, there were literally thousands of these things. I bought a little Cnc Knee Mill. It was what kind of knee mill was that? It was a Clausing Colchester knee mill, actually the machine, and it had a Dynapath control on it. And I made a little fixture that held, I think it was 8 of these things at one time, and it would face it, and it would drill and tap this hole. Well, actually, I had to tap the hole on it with a tapping head because that machine didn't have the tapping capability as far as rigid tapping or anything. And it put a little chamfer, I think, in this thing. And actually, I only got like $1.60 a piece for these things, but I would go get them by the thousands and run them in the garage on the weekends. And these are the kind of things I did to get started. This is the kind of work you have to do. You almost have to get work from other machine shops in the beginning, because you can't really just walk into a customer cold and say, I can do work for you. And then you probably don't have the equipment you need in the beginning anyway. And so you're almost stuck to do work for other machine shops. And in reality, quoting that stuff is really, most of the time, it's not even quoted at all. They just say, can you do this for this price? And you either accept it or reject it. And one thing I would caution people about is don't accept everything that you can get, because a lot of times they want it for less than you can do it for. You got to be kind of careful of that, and don't establish your reputation for just doing anything no matter what the cost. You don't really want to do that. You want to establish a reputation of doing quality work, and it costs money to do quality work. You got to be careful. But if you agree to a price for a job, don't go back and ask for more money. Never, ever do that. No matter what it costs you to do the job, complete it, and deliver the job. Because you're establishing a reputation that if you get a chance to quote a job in the future, they're going to say, well, is that going to be the real price? Or is he going to come back and ask you for more, or what? So you don't, I mean, I don't know what other people did mostly, but what I did was whenever I settled on a price, whatever that may be, I do that job no matter what it costs me to do it. Sometimes you lose money, sometimes you do real well. This is the nature of the work. Don't come back and ask for more money. And if you can help it, don't come back and ask for more time. So try to be accurate with your timing on the job. This is a technique a lot of people use. They quote the job low, they go back and say, well, it's not working out the way I thought, I want more money. Or they are not totally honest about their delivery time, and they give a better delivery time. I've lost many jobs because my delivery was further out than this other guy's. And then I asked the buyer later, I said, well, did you get the parts when he said? And almost every time they would tell me no, that in essence my delivery would have been fine, because that's when they really got the parts. And they would have rather go with me, but they couldn't tolerate my delivery schedule. Or maybe they were being unrealistic about a delivery, I don't know, but this is important, because in the beginning you're building a reputation. You're not making a lot of money in the beginning maybe, but you're building a reputation that you do quality work and that you deliver it when you said you're going to deliver it. I can't stress that enough. Don't go back and ask for more money or more. Well, sometimes it's unavoidable to ask for more time, and sometimes it's the customer's fault. They change things, and you got to communicate with them. If you make these changes, it's going to affect this and this and this, like the money or the time or whatever, and have an understanding with them. Don't just let them call you and say, oh, can you do this? I forgot this, or can we change this a little bit? And you go, okay, yeah, that's not a problem. Don't do that. Try to tell them it's not a problem if it isn't, but it's going to impinge a little bit upon the financial arrangement or the delivery if it does. If it doesn't, then fine, do it. But you got to be kind of careful in the way you communicate with people on these kind of things, or else there's a misunderstanding develops, and then there's bad feeling about you, your reputation and everything, and it makes you difficult. It makes it difficult for you next time maybe to go back around and get more work for these people if that's what you want. Also, I try to stay away from, if for the most part, unless I know the person really well, about these people with these inventor type people. They have these little projects they're working on, and they're trying to find machine work, but they don't really want to pay very much for it. And if you know the person, he's your friend, fine. But if it's just somebody that walks in, I've had people do this, and then I give them the price for my work, and they almost get mad at me. They get insulted. They say, "Wow, why does it cost so much?" And I said, "Well, I said, I do this for a living. I'm not giving away my time. This is what it takes to do it. And if you want to pay, it's fine. You'll get the part. But if you don't, I'm sorry. But they actually almost get mad at you and stomp out, and you never see them again sometimes, and that's fine, because you don't want to do work for nothing. If you want to make a living at this, you have to do it and make sure that people understand that you do the job, you're going to get quality work, and this is what it costs to do quality work. It's you don't want to build a reputation of just doing inexpensive things, because it doesn't really help you out in the end. You can get tons of work for little money, but then you work yourself to death and you don't get anywhere. It's like, why do it? Why even bother if you're gonna just work and not get anywhere with it? So that would caution you about anybody that's gonna do this kind of work for a living. Give yourself a fair price. And people that know what they want and they do this, they buy this kind of work, they understand what it costs, and you'll lose some jobs and you'll get some jobs, but you don't want to work for nothing. That's important. So I want you to remember that. So after I was in the garage for a while, I rented a space for myself, and I took more kind of commercial work to do, I'll put it. Still working through other machine shops mostly, and friends of mine that had machine shops. It is helpful to know people. It's very difficult if you don't know anybody just to walk in somewhere and get work. They don't know you, and so they're going to give work to their friends, or the people they know. So you got to develop some relationships with people in other shops. If you work in a shop, you might be able to get work for that shop if your employer allows you to do work while you work for them. This centerline machine here, there's at least 2 people I know that have their own shops on the side, and they do work, and centerline gives them work to do. This is kind of unusual. A lot of shops don't do that, but they do that with these 2 individuals, and even though they work for them as well during the day, in the evenings and on the weekends they work at their own little shops. And this is one way to get started. Don't just quit your job and go and start a shop, because that's going to be very difficult to do. You need a side income while you build up some customer base and some financial resources to do this, because it is pretty expensive. Machinery, tooling, and everything costs money. So I rented this space, and then I took work actually from the shop I was working at, would give me work, and I developed some reputation, and they would introduce me or recommend me to other places. It's just the way it starts, and then you start developing a reputation around town to do that. You did quality work, and you know what you're doing, and you delivered their parts, and they went through inspection and everything, and there was no problem. And pretty soon you're just building on this, and then pretty soon it'll come time maybe to hire somebody, and you get more work, and so on. And this is kind of the way it's done for most people that I've seen. I've had employees of mine that started their own shops, and generally speaking, I didn't give them work to do if they had their own shop, but I would recommend them or show them a place that they could get work, maybe that the work I didn't want to deal with, or it was more suited to what they're trying to do, or things like that. And they would go get it, and if somebody called me about them, I would tell them, yeah, I think you could depend on this guy. And so they were developing this relationship, and that's the way it worked for them. And when I sold my bigger shop, this Centerline, what's Centerline now, there was a guy that worked for me. He wanted to do this and start his own business. So actually in my new space that I had leased, where I had this horizontal mill and other machinery, before I moved back into here, I leased him some space in my building because I had extra space in there in my spot. And he started on this work that I actually got him his first major job, because my non-compete didn't allow me to actually do work for those people, but I knew of this job and I knew the buyer, and I got him the job so that he could get started. And he's got a pretty good little shop running, but it takes work and sacrifice that you have to be willing to do, or it's not gonna, and you gotta have a passion for doing it. You can't just treat it like a job, I guess you would say. You have to spend a lot of time in the beginning, and you don't necessarily make tons of money. It takes you away from your family. If you have a family, you got to be aware of this. And your wife and family, if you have that, have to be understanding about that, because it's going to take a lot of time in the beginning. It's not, I don't want to discourage anybody, but it's going to take time, and you got to put in that time. It's not something like it's going to happen overnight. It probably takes 4 or 5 years to really get established in this kind of a thing. And this is probably true of anything, actually. And you want to, well, you don't want to, but you have to spend the time to do it. If you're working another job, you're going to be working there 8 or 10 hours, and you're going to feel like, man, I don't feel like going over there and doing that work, but you've got to do it. If you want to do it and be successful, you have to spend that time to do it and get the parts done if you've taken a job. Don't ever let a job not be completed. So after I rented this little space, I actually got a job making guns, which I'm not wild about making guns. I'm not really a gun nut or anything like that, but I got this job from this guy, and we made this reproduction of a German Luger in stainless steel. And I did that for maybe about 4 or 5 years, actually. I don't know, maybe not that long, but it was a pretty good amount of time. And I learned about the gun industry, and in reality, I kind of stay away from the gun industry now, because I don't like dealing with the people too much in the gun industry. I'm sure there's plenty of good people, but the people I dealt with, by and large, were not totally honest in the way they dealt with things. Is the only way I could put it. But I got going with that, and then at the meantime, I met another guy who I eventually partnered up with, who got work from, in those days it was Western Atlas. Now it's Baker Hughes, is basically that company. And we did work for it's kind of petrochemical instrumentation type work, which I still do some here of that kind of stuff, but I do it through Centerline now. And and he helped me, but there came a time when him and I disagreed with stuff, and I had to buy him out, and it cost me a lot of money. And I would give advice to people, if possible, go on your own and don't have partners. But it's up to you. Some people make this partner thing work pretty good for them, but in the past, for me, these partner arrangements always had problematic situations develop, and it can cost you a lot of money to buy a partner out or something like that, if you want to do that, or be bought out if you want to go that direction. But so I would say try to do it yourself. Maybe even family members as a partner can be problematic. Although my wife and I have always worked together, and we've always made that work. But a lot of people have told us, how do you do that? How do you work with your wife? Yeah, I could never do that, but for me that worked. So that's up to you. But I don't know. Some people have problems with that. So let me go check these machines, and we'll get back to this if this is interesting to you. Okay, went and indexed a few inserts on the horizontal and checked the Mazak here. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, we were talking about the first space that I'd rented, and I bought a little, I moved the machines I had in the garage, which was the Mirando lathe, the Cnc Knee Mill, the CNC Knee Mill, And what else I had? I had a Marvel bandsaw, and the various drill presses and grinder and stuff, and that little Miller welder thing I had. And when I moved in there, I also I purchased a used Herco Cnc Knee Mill, KM3P, I believe was the model, if I remember. And I bought that from actually the place I worked from. They were selling a few of their machines, and I bought it from them. And I put that in there. It had the Ultimax 2 control with the 2 screens on it. I had that Herco for quite a while. The Dynapad control on the Clausine was a nice control. It was I think it was a Delta 10 control, if I remember right. I don't know if I could even run it now. It's been so long since I ran the Dynapad control, or even the Herco control. I'd have to take a few minutes to look at it and figure it out again. So those were the 2 CNC machines I had, and I had the engine lathe, and that was when I started working on the gun parts, and we were making the gun parts, and any thing I needed CNC turning on. Well, we just outright bought little screw machine parts like pins and small screws and stuff. We didn't make that stuff, but did the machine work on the castings. We had castings made, investment castings and such for that. So we were doing that, and I also did small jobs from my old place that I worked, because by this point I had quit my job over there and I was working full time at machining, and I think there were jobs for NASA, although I couldn't go directly to NASA because I wasn't a vendor of theirs, but I do work for them, and there were NASA jobs, mostly aluminum jobs, things like that. Pretty easy to machine type materials, and that's what I did there for how long was I there? Probably 4 years maybe in that spot. And I fixed the spot up, put air conditioning in there, and I think by the time we moved to the next building, we had like 3 or 4 employees working there with these gun parts. And we moved to the next building, which was sort of almost a partnership with this guy in the front of the building, because I wasn't selling the guns directly. I was just machining the work, and then he actually dealt with the customer who bought the gun. So in a way that worked good for me. I had an FFL manufacturing license because I needed that, but I didn't have to keep direct books on the sale of the guns or have the insurance necessary for that purpose. Although I was kind of covered under his insurance in a way, but in a way it was sort of like a little bit of a partnership with him, and this sort of didn't work out for me, because I think on the side he has some investors in his project, because he was the one actually selling the guns at that time to Mitchell Firearms and then later to Stoger, and he would tell his investors that my shop was his shop, and this didn't work out, because when I figured that out, and actually he even forged my signature on a few things, so we kind of separated, and had a little difficulty moving my equipment out of the building, even because it was his building, and so I had to go through a legal issue with him on getting the equipment, and I moved into this. Actually, in the current building that this is right here, but it wasn't all of this space. It was a smaller space with this guy that I had sort of partnered with to get the work from Western Atlas, and that's when actually I started doing quite a bit better, and I stopped making the gun parts for this guy. And there was a little legal battle that ensued over that, but I started doing the work for these oil field companies at that point, but I had this business partner, which also later I had to buy him out. We didn't leave, with bad feelings or anything, but it cost me money to buy him out. So you got to be aware of that. If you go into partnership with somebody, they're going to own a percentage. That's what being a partner is. And if someday you feel like, oh, you can't get along with them, or they don't want to do any work anymore, and so they want to be bought out, you're going to have to take that into account. So, maybe it's just me. Maybe I have bad luck with partners. I don't know. I prefer to be just on my own. I think that's the best way to go. And so we're in here, we're doing the oil field work, we're expanding the business up to a point of, I had, at the maximum, I think we had 55 people working for us. This was after I got rid of that partner guy, and everything's just me and my wife running the business. And in a way, I got a little bit tired of dealing with employees and the issue of business itself. I don't really care that much for business. My wife kind of likes it, and she enjoys doing the business stuff in a way a lot more than I do. So she was a lot better at it, developed relationships with the bankers and this and that. Me, it's machining. I love to do machining, and so it came a point when some of these people would come, and if you have a successful business, a lot of times they'll ask, come and inquire about buying your business. And so you have people constantly doing this, and it came to a point where the offer was good enough and the time was right, and I said, okay, we can do this thing. And I sold the shop to this individual and his investors. He had investors with him, which is what the current shop is now, Centerline Manufacturing. And they've grown the business even larger than what I had. If you want to see that, I have a video called Shop Tour, and I go through the shop and I show you various things. And even in that video, I show you the machines that I originally had, or some of the machines that still exist that I had in the garage, because they still have a few of them over in the corner here. And so and then when I sold the shop, I bought the two little machines I have in the garage, the Haas mill and lathe, and I thought, I'm just going to do my thing, and I'm just going to do like little hobby work and stuff in the garage. And pretty soon I have some customers that I used to have, they're saying, can't you do this or that or whatever? And I started tackling these jobs, and then I got the idea to rent another space, 6,000 square feet over there, which is a space that I had this other guy that used to work for me and that I had mentioned earlier. And so I'm working over there, and I'm doing mostly R&D work for R&D, I think it was for Barco Shaper in those days. And that was good work, and you don't really have to quote it. It's just like a time and material type of thing. And I like doing that work. But then Centerline came back and asked me, they had a group of parts that were these titanium parts, kind of a high-profile, expensive part that Baker Hughes wanted to make, and they wanted to do it, but they felt like they maybe didn't have people that had the technical expertise to do it. And would I be interested in moving back in the shop to do the parts, or at least even just set up the job for them? And I said, I would be willing to do the parts, but I don't want to do it on the equipment you have. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to need the right machine, which is when I bought this Integrex here to do that. And so I moved back in the building, and actually, but I'm still a separate company, and I rent space from them, and I pay a rent every month, which includes everything, utilities, air, water, whatever. They even clean up the area around my equipment and all that, and I just pay one fee for the rent and all of that. I don't have to worry about how much electricity I use or air. I use their air from their air compressor, which is probably part of the noise you're hearing, because it's right behind this wall where I'm at here, and I do all that, and I just get one flat fee, which is I kind of like. I get internet, everything, all for that one flat fee, and so I know what to expect from that, and it's kind of nice. And what they do for me is provide me work to do, and I have an agreement with them that says I can if they can't provide me enough work, I can go and get outside jobs to do. But I haven't really needed to do that for the past. That was in, when did I move back in this building? I sold the shop in 2005. I was over there probably about 6 years, maybe 7. So I've probably been in here almost 5 years now, in here doing this stuff for them. And in all those 5 years, I've done a few little outside jobs for friends of mine that I didn't really need to do because they've always supplied me plenty of work to do. And people have asked about how I quote these jobs and all that, and in reality, I don't have to quote anything anymore because they quote it. Centerline quotes it, gets the work, and if it's a job that fits me, they might say, would you be interested? And I say, well, okay, but how much can you pay? And they give me a price, and I either say, I'm not happy with that, or okay, that'll be fine. And sometimes if I'm not happy, I can negotiate a little bit different price with them. I'm sure they don't throw out the maximum they can pay to me the first time. You know, they're trying to make money themselves, so they have a little to work with a lot of times. And I said, no, you know, I need a little bit more. And that's the way we do it now. And so far it's worked good. They must get good money for their parts because I don't buy material. I don't provide the certs for the material. I don't have to, although I have a quality manual and a quality program because it's necessary for me to be a vendor of theirs, I don't actually have to provide any of the quality to the final customer. They do it. And they communicate with the final customer. If I have a question, I tell them, they ask the question, they get it back to me. And if this is perfect for me. I love this situation. It's like, who could come up with this situation as a machinist? It's really unusual and difficult. And I tell that to some people and they go, wow, you know, how did you accomplish that? And all I can say is it's almost by accident it happened. You know, they trust my work. They want me to come back do this particular job. Now that I'm in here, they give me other work to do, and it's working great that way. So that's a little bit about my past history and how that works. As to quoting jobs, people have asked me about this, and to tell you the truth, quoting a job is kind of like your best guess. That's the only way I can put it. You could go through all these, you know, like John Saunders does. If you watch his channel, he's got all these spreadsheets and all this, and that's fine and that's good if it works for you. I didn't totally do it that way. I just wrote stuff down and looked at it, and then you look at this final number, and you're going to say to yourself, will the customer buy that, or will they not, or is that good for me or not? You know, do I want to make more money on it if I get it? You know, do I really want to do it for this price? And then and this is the truth, then you just take that number and you say, I'm going to add or subtract to it, and that's my quote. And that's the only way I can really put it. You know, you can go through all these fancy calculations. You could even program it on the computer, partially program it, run through the simulations and everything, and then in the end you're going to get that number, and you're going to say, do I like that or not? You know, am I feeling good about that number, or do I think it should be this, or what's this customer going to? And sometimes you can call the customer up if you're really friendly with the buyer or somebody over there, you know, and you can say, you know, what are you paying for these, or what do you have a feeling, you know, and maybe you can even get the price. That's even more ideal. Or, you know, and then maybe you could afford to come in a little bit lower than that and you can get the job. But there again, it all goes back to this reputation thing, which if you establish a good reputation, sometimes they don't always go with the lowest price. This is well, it's always does, you know, they're going to go with the person they like or they're confident in, because a lot of times these people that give the lowest price come back, and this is what I told you, don't go back and ask for more money. Or they have problems and they, oh, you know, this tool broke or this machine malfunctioned or whatever. And it's important, and I'm going to say it to you, don't go back and ask for more money. And if you can help it, don't go back and ask for more time. More time's not as harmful as more money. More money is is a big mistake. Don't do that. It's I never did that. I don't care if the job cost me money and I paid for the customer to take it from me. I would never go back and ask for more money. So I don't know if that helps anybody about quoting, but it's that's the way in essence it really is. It's like, and once you do it enough, you can just look at a job and say, I want that much for that job. See, this is what I do right now. They give me a price, I say, great, let's go. Or I say, no, I want to get, maybe $500 more or something, whatever, and they either agree to it or not, and I either settle for the lower price or I say, no, I can't do it. And like I said before, don't be afraid to pass up a job. There'll be other jobs. Don't be so anxious to take a job that you do it and you're paying the customer to take it from you. Don't be doing that, any more than you can help it. There's only one good reason to do that, maybe, is to try to develop a relationship. You don't know this person, you want to get that first job, and maybe you might tend to lose a little money on that first job just to get in there with that customer. That I have done, and that does work, but be careful about that, because then they expect this low price, and so you're already establishing this reputation that you give this low price for your work, and you don't really want to do that. You want to say, I provide quality work, I do it on time, and it's cost this much, and it's worth that, because you can be confident that you're going to get what you want, and you're not going to have problems with it later on, whatever your parts do. And so that's important. So I don't know if this is the kind of video that you guys want to see or like, or is helpful at all to you. Let me know, and maybe I can discuss more things like this. I don't consider myself a super business person. In fact, business is not interesting to me at all, to tell you the truth. I like machine work, but it's tied together if you're going to do this for a living, and you have to, deal with people in the business sense, like bankers, finance companies, insurance, stuff like that. So if this is interesting, to me, it's not all that interesting, but if it is, then let me know, and we can discuss other things associated with this for people that are trying to get started. So let me know in the comments.